Yeah, we talk grind, we talk goals, street hustle, rhythm control, ideas cooking flame on high. No shortcuts, just do or die. 86 opinions, both precision, no permission. We build a vision, we rise, we move, we own this lane. 86 opinions, remember the name. Real talk, no filters needed. If it's raw truth, we feed it.
Welcome back to another episode of 86 Opinions, where we are taking everything in the restaurant industry and we are cooking it up on a silver platter, and we are 86ing opinions because your opinion is not part of the recipe. So for this episode, we want to talk about kind of how the Digital Chef and White Bus Media and everything that we do just kind of came to be. And the reason that this is important is because every restaurant owner, every food truck operator, everything within your business has a story, and it's important for us to capture those stories and get that out to our target audience simply because that lets people know who we are. So just like everything else, we are no different. We have a story and we want to share our story with you. This episode is going to give you some context behind why we do what we do and how we got to where we're at, not just because we studied marketing, but because we lived every chaotic minute of the modern food business, stemming from breweries to food trucks to backyard caterings to takeout counters, food truck parks, through the pandemic, everything in between. We're built on experience, experimentation, and evolution. We're not just built on theory. We have been in this game from the bottom up. Our story stems back to the year 2015 when I actually was stepping into civilian life with no real plan other than don't screw this up. I left the Marine Corps in August of 2000. I actually left the Marine Corps in June of 2015, but my retirement kicked in August. So I had about 2 months where I was getting paid to where I could absolutely kind of figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew that the first part of that phase was already in play. I had already applied to and been accepted to a fermentation science program at Central Michigan University. And so as we were on our way back, traveling from San Diego, California, back to Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where Central Michigan is located, Fire Up Chips, I was on the phone with so many different breweries and things of that nature. I knew when I got out of the Marine Corps, I wanted to brew beer. I knew that taking this program into fermentation science was the way to get there. And the one issue that I was running into with this fermentation science program is that in order to get the full benefits out of the GI Bill, I had to be a full-time student. That status had to be full-time in order to max out the benefits. And it just seemed kind of silly to me at the time to take advantage of the GI Bill, but not take advantage of it to its fullest extent. So while I was figuring out this fermentation science program, I also became a full-time student by adding in social media marketing classes. So social media marketing classes, this was where I was purely just doing this to fill credits, or so I thought at the time. So I took them to stay full-time, not really to become the dollar store version of a Gary Vaynerchuk or anybody of that nature. I literally just wanted to be a full-time student and max out my GI Bill credits. What ended up happening ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me in learning the marketing aspect and what it truly takes to drive a business and how social media campaigns could truly be developed through a little bit of strategy and implementing brand identity and all that stuff into your campaigns. And the biggest thing that stuck with me was telling that story. Everything in a business has a story. The person has a story. The business has a story. If you make hamburgers, every hamburger has a story. Every condiment on that hamburger has a story. The bun has a story. These are all stories that you can take on social media and explain to your target audience about how you got that bun into your store and why you chose that store. And this approach to modern day marketing within the restaurant industry was very, very intriguing to me. I absolutely loved everything about it. During this time frame of taking the classes, we also started doing backyard caterings. This was something that I had picked up on in California. I had a big smoker that we used. We used to take it around to our kids' Little League for the Little League, tri-tips, all the good stuff out in California. So when we got back to Michigan, it just seemed right that just continued. So we would meet up in backyards. We would throw down ribs and brisket and chicken and tri-tip and pork butts and all the good stuff. And it got to the point that we started creating somewhat of a buzz around what we were doing. And people actually started requesting us to come out to their backyard parties, their family reunions, their graduation open houses, things of that nature. And it was absolutely just an awesome, exciting time of my life. As this was going on, I kind of got a call from the health department, and the health department told me that what we were doing was not legal. To be honest with you, I didn't even take anything that we were doing as though I was creating a business. I was simply just having fun. I was doing things for family and friends and people within the community. But when they told me that what we were doing was illegal and that we had to be licensed in order to continue to do this, my next question, logical question, was, how do we do that? What do we need to do to get licensed? That is where my story changed completely. So during this time, I was actually working in the brewing world. I was in a Central Michigan brewery that needed just a little bit of a glow up. I walked into this brewery when they hired me, and they had 2 beers on tap, and they had like 8 taps sitting there. And it was one of those situations where the owners had a falling out, and I was available to brew, and the owner that was left didn't really know much about the brewing industry. So she just basically asked me, do you want to come do this? I just need beer coming out of those taps. And I agreed to do it. So while I was working this brewery thing, and while I was dealing with this phone call from the health department, we just started building a food truck. And unbeknownst to me, those throwaway social media classes just suddenly became my secret weapon. We started documenting everything that we were doing at the brewery. We started implementing trivia nights. We started implementing little events that homebrewers could come in and enjoy, homebrew competitions. All the while, the meantime, I was absolutely using Facebook on my personal account to tell people about the barbecue that we were doing. We just started creating, posting, experimenting, measuring what happened. And as this was going on, I just kind of happened to notice that the foot traffic was increasing for the brewery, that was growing, and that the ideas were working. So I took that same concept that we were doing at the brewery, and I just started putting it behind this food truck that I was building at the same time. And next thing I know, that brand started growing. And at the time, I don't even think it was a brand yet. It was just Doug. Right? I took a flat deck trailer down to a buddy, and we built a smoker. We put a reverse flow cabinet smoker on it, and man, I tell you what, that thing ran like a tank. I absolutely loved it. This is what became the first real taste of me taking strategy and hospitality and storytelling, and I could tell that I was building something. I could tell that everything that we were doing was just going in the right direction. It got to the point that we were bringing in barbecue, and we were cooking and having events at the brewery. We were kind of intertwining the two. We were having brewers bashes, and we were cooking up chicken wings and pulled pork, and it just kind of seemed to be something that beer and barbecue went together so well that I knew I was onto something. I knew that what we had going was not just something that was not worth chasing, that it wasn't going to just fly by the seat of my pants and kind of go away. This barbecue hustle was going to do things that even I didn't know that I was prepared for. Backyard caterings, the pit life, friends telling friends, food everywhere. I mean, it was just so much fun. So as I said a minute ago, when the health department called and they gave me that, hey, you need to be licensed, I went right back to that military mindset. Roger that. We're in it. We're licensing. In the next 1.5 years of blood, sweat, metal, permits, and probably some questionable decisions along the way really got us geared up to our first launch. And I will never forget the day that we set out, our first day in the food truck. I was still working at the brewery at the time as well. This was 2 things that I was kind of intermingling together. However, I didn't own the brewery. I knew that the food truck, the barbecue side of things, was going to be something that I owned, and that was important to me. I loved the brewing world. I loved everything about it, but it wasn't mine. Blood, sweat, and tears that we put into the building of the food truck was really where my passion started to lie. Fast forward to the first week of November 2017. This was just a short 2 years after I had retired from the Marine Corps. I'd been working at the brewery. I had taken the social media marketing classes. I had gotten the phone call from the health department. I had taken on the whatever you want to call it, the task or getting this food truck licensed. Let me back up on that for a second, because if you're thinking about getting a food truck licensed, I can tell you right now that the best place to start is with your local health department. They're not there to work against you as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do. And talking to the health department and the Small Business Development Center right off the bat was absolutely the best thing that I ever did for my business. They got me on the straight and narrow, and they got me rolling in the right directions. And even though it took me a year and a half to fully get that license, I never really had any hiccups. Everything went very smoothly. After we got the cabinet smoker built on, we took the trailer over to the Amish. They built a log cabin out of it, and once the log cabin was around it, I probably don't want to tell the health department this, but we were still rolling around doing backyard caterings. We were just doing it in the food truck with no plumbing, nothing on the inside. We were hauling water jugs. We were doing everything that we needed to do. In fact, I think for a long time, I actually had a blow-up mattress inside the cabin. And we were just utilizing that to sleep, and we were doing hog roasts and weekend parties, and it was just one of the most eventful times of my life. We got through that year and a half of getting it all licensed and doing that, and we were using the money from the small weekend gigs. Every time we did a gig, that money went into the food truck build. We'd do another gig, we'd advance the build, we put in the plumbing, we put in the electricity, we put in all the equipment that we needed. And now we're going to fast forward to the first week of November 2017. We rolled up to Roadside Barbecue, our very first outing in our newly licensed food truck. This was just outside of Mount Pleasant, Michigan. We'd been looking forward to this day for a while. We had started capturing that brand on Facebook. By this time, the business had a brand. We were operating as Maxon's Blue Country Barbecue. That was kind of a play for us off of the town that we were in, Beale City, Michigan. So BC stood for Beale City. BC stood for Blue Country. We were able to adopt kind of the BC logo into our barbecue logo. And it had so much of the community hometown feel that even I wasn't ready for what was about to happen. When we rolled up that cold fall day in Michigan, first week in November 2017, I will never forget the feeling of pulling into that parking lot and looking up and going, wow, this is for real. There was 45 to 50 people that were already waiting for us to be there, and we weren't even set up yet. And that is when reality completely hit me that what we were doing was good. From that moment forward, I implemented all the things that I learned in those bullshit social media marketing classes, as I used to call them. I implemented the things that I learned, and I started storytelling, and I started sharing everything about our business with the general public. And from that moment on, our marketing skyrocketed. Our brand just became this monstrosity of a thing that I'm not even sure I was ready for. And to be honest with you, we just spent the next so many years holding on for dear life and riding that train. The food truck turned into a catering company. We were legitimately doing weddings at big venues, cooking for 300 to 400 people at a time. We got so big that we couldn't even keep enough food on hand in stock inside the truck, because we had so much of a demand. Supply and demand hit us hard, and it got difficult for us to supply the demand that people were asking for. Once we became that catering company and we began cooking for those 300 to 400 people, that led us right into, within a year, from 2017 to 2018, 12 months, we took that food truck concept, that catering concept, and we became a brick and mortar takeout counter by the end of 2018, and it was a full hybrid operation, all backed by the power of digital marketing at the time. From 2018 to 2023, we did just that. We ran the brick and mortar, we ran the food truck full force, we continued the catering, we had a staff of 18 people, we had the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs. We operated this through the pandemic. And to be honest with you, the pandemic was actually, I'm not going to say the pandemic was one of the best things that happened to our business. That is absolutely erroneous to say. However, when the pandemic did hit the restaurant industry, there was this period of time where everybody was in Michigan was kind of shut down for 2 weeks because everybody had to learn how to do takeout. People had to start figuring out takeout containers. Everybody had to start figuring out this concept of just coming up to a window to order. And we flourished during that time frame because when everybody else had to shut down and figure this out, when all the food suppliers were running out of takeout supplies because every restaurant had to start doing takeout, we were already stocked. We were already doing takeout. We were lucky enough that when we got the building that we moved our barbecue operations into, the way that it was actually designated, the way that the building was zoned, we had to do takeout. We could never do a full-blown sit-down, come in and eat restaurants. We were takeout from the very beginning. And so during the pandemic, when things got weird, we kept right on a trucking. We never had to shut down for that 2 weeks, and our business blew up with the attention that we got as being one of the only restaurants open in the area. More important than being noticed as one of the restaurants open in the area was that I myself, as the owner, started noticing patterns that were taking place in the industry. I started noticing that what was happening in the industry, this digital wave that people were considering being created by COVID, as far as, delivery, online ordering, things of that nature, it wasn't something that COVID created. It was something that was coming anyway because the consumer behavior was shifting, and it was shifting permanently. COVID did nothing more but speed this up and accelerated what was already happening. Once we noticed these shifts in behavior, I began studying marketing very hard. Now, my background in the military did have a lot to do with psychology, sociology, things of that nature. So I feel like it was just kind of a natural progression for me that even though I went through these fermentation science classes, even though I had all this restaurant stuff that I had been going on, it just was a natural progression for me to be able to focus a little bit harder on the marketing aspect of things because it fit the way that my brain worked already anyway. Being able to implement systems, look at the funnels, look at the data that we were collecting. Watching customer behavior was a huge one about what people were doing. Things that we did for branding as far as setting up places that our customers could just come and take pictures that I knew they would post online because they would gravitate towards those areas of my restaurant. One of the best ones that we had, it was a cutout wanted poster that people could stand behind. And it was a $10,000 reward, like 1800 style wanted poster, $10,000 reward for putting ketchup on brisket. And then it had a little blurb on the bottom that said last seen at, Maxon's Blue Country Barbecue, 20 East Remus Road, Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And every time somebody came and took a picture at that sign, they put it on social media. This was just absolute awesome use of what was going on. And I started to pick up on all that customer behavior. From 2021 to 2023, I will admit, 2021 was probably the year that broke me operationally in the restaurant game, simply because staffing became at an all-time low. We were running a logistical nightmare to have to deal with staffing issues. I made some really bad hires. I hired somebody that was supposed to be an integral part of my business because my head chef had passed away during COVID, actually. Great dude. I'll never forget Paul. He was one of the driving forces of our restaurant, and he was the mastermind behind the 27 different sauces that we used, all made from scratch. And that man was a detrimental role to me having the success that I had. And after he passed away, I had to find somewhat of a replacement of somebody that could run the pit, and I picked the wrong person. I did start noticing that my shift was going a lot more from the operational side of a restaurant to the marketing side of a restaurant. What I started doing while we were still open in 2021 and 2022 is I dove in headfirst into everything digital marketing for restaurants, small businesses, all of that. I was experimenting with things within our own restaurant. I was looking to see what worked on social media and what didn't. And while this was going on, I started actually doing freelance social media marketing for other places while I was still running my own restaurant. Because the biggest thing that we realized is that old marketing tactics were dying. We didn't quite know what it was yet, but we just started realizing that what we were doing marketing-wise prior to the pandemic simply didn't work anymore. And in 2022, I didn't even open my restaurant. We were a summer-based business already anyway. I simply took the entire summer to focus on the marketing industry, the marketing world, and where that was headed for restaurants. The entire year of 2022, I did nothing but dive deep into data, marketing data. I kept hearing this word thrown around that if you captured the data of your customers and if you followed the metrics, all these words that really I knew what they meant, but I didn't know how they all played into customer acquisition. And when I started learning about the importance of capturing data on your customers, the importance of looking at specific key metrics, the importance of knowing what it cost you to get a new customer in your door compared to what it kept to retain the customer, I started seeing that it was cheaper to retain customers than it was to get new customers. And the majority of restaurant owners at this time, and to this day still, we're still just focused on trying to get new customers in the door, and we don't even think about following up with our customers that we already have. We might, respond to them on social media or something of that nature, but we're not giving them anything to come back. And all of these things really stuck with me. Right along the side of branding and actually building a brand behind a business versus just serving food and letting the word of mouth take its course, we realized that what we were doing is going into a complete digital transformation, and that it was going to mean the difference between owning a job and actually owning and building a business. And just like I was taught in the Marine Corps, adapt and overcome. You adapt because smart businesses adapt. Adapting in business is what keeps you alive. As this continued to go on from 2022 to 2023, I kind of had a year where I had to have shoulder surgery. My dad was in and out of the hospital. There was a lot of things going on. The building was coming up on the 5-year mark, which I knew going into this whole adventure of taking this into the building that the 5-year mark, 2023, was going to be where I made the decision of whether we were going to stick with it or whether we were going to have an exit strategy. So I always had an exit strategy in mind at the 5-year mark. Whether or not I was going to execute it or not was always left up to getting to that point. And when that 5-year mark came, I realized that my greatest value for a future, for myself and my happiness and my family and my life, it wasn't flipping brisket anymore. It was flipping businesses. So in 2023, we completely went through a rebrand. With my shoulder surgery, the lack of ability to get quality employees that would stick around, still traversing that and not knowing the ins and outs of a lot of it, knowing that I wanted to sell the building. I think at this point we'd already sold the food truck. I sold the food truck in 2021. So by the time this rolled around, we had already sold the food truck. I knew I wanted to sell the building. I knew I was headed towards a marketing career and not an operational restaurant career at this time. The writing was well written on the wall by the success that we were having. And so we went through an absolute rebrand and we dummied everything down that we were doing because I knew that in order to sell the building and the business, I had to have the business operating through there. So we spent 10 months going through a rebrand, getting open, dummying it down. And for the last 6 to 8 months that we actually operated this, we operated it with myself and 2 or 3 employees, and we kept it going. We started doing shaved ice from New Orleans, and we utilized this opportunity to close this chapter and to choose a new mission within the marketing industry. When we sold our food truck in 2021, we had bought a little white school bus that was converted over into a motorhome, and we knew that that's where we wanted our life to be. Somebody had told me during this time frame, and it really stuck with me, that instead of building a business and revolving your life around the business, because I think to some degree I was still missing that identity of being a Marine. I was lacking an identity, and I went from making brewing my identity to making barbecue my identity, and it was just kind of consuming me. So I knew that I needed to have full clarity in what I was doing as an individual so that I could make the best possible life for myself. And somebody told me at one point, build your life and then build your business around your life. So that's exactly what we did. We took the freelance work that we had been doing and we started developing a lot more clarity into that. and learning a lot more about that aspect of things. And within 2 years, we had taken this marketing freelance work that we were doing, and we developed that into a full-blown LLC in the beginning of 2025. White Bus Media became the hub of everything that we were going to do and are still doing for our future. But along with that, I knew that we did not want to be just another marketing agency. I refused to just be another marketing agency. Other marketing agencies are a dime a dozen, and we didn't want that. They kind of had a bad taste in their mouth. I knew that running a restaurant, operating every day, and people coming in to just sell you things was just, man, it was just so drastic at sometimes. Like, you're trying to feed people, the thousands of people that you feed a day, and then you got somebody coming in and trying to sell you services. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to become strategic partners, and we wanted to become systems builders. So that's where we came up with the idea that we are going to develop these systems, marketing systems that can assist restaurant owners in the day-to-day tasks to help them go from owning their jobs to actually working on a business and putting ourselves in the middle as fractional CMOs and somewhat of a managing partnership, if you will. We learned around this time that you're not just there to run ads. You're building a foundation. We don't want to just go out and make social media posts. We want to craft brands. We're not offering marketing. We are offering complete business transformations. When we realized this, that is when the digital chef became the voice of this journey. Hospitality was meeting strategy, kitchens were meeting KPIs, and that's when we came up with the tagline of "Your opinion is not part of the recipe." Because in 2022, there was a huge shift in the marketing world, especially with restaurants and food trucks, where just posting pictures of your food wasn't cutting it anymore. You had to dive into the metrics. You had to dive into the data. And if you wanted to actually grow a brand, this was going to become a very necessitative part of the future of your business. So there was a point when I went through kind of the struggles that everybody else does, and I kind of still do to a degree. There's no doubt about that, is that I didn't really want, as much as my face was the face of the barbecue restaurant and that was my identity, I didn't necessarily want to be the digital chef face of White Bus Media. And man, we tried so hard to make it work without having a person as a face through this, technological age and all of this stuff that was coming in. And it just came to the point where it's like we knew the personal brand was the way to go. There had to be a digital chef personal brand spun off of White Bus Media. And White Bus Media is where we still do help service-based businesses. And then the digital chef kind of just formed into my alter ego and this educator persona and kind of the megaphone for helping restaurants and food trucks survive the next decade. So to reinforce all of this and why I kind of highlight my story for everybody is that I think it's important for restaurant owners, business owners, and everybody to understand that evolution and adaptability is where your story meets the strategy. You have a story. There's nothing wrong with getting out and telling your story because your culinary roots are going to meet the digital future. This is huge within the industry. You've lived the grind. I've lived the grind. We've ran the restaurants. We've built the food trucks. We've survived the chaos. And now it's just time to work together to do the same. We can do this smartly, we can do it profitably, and we can do it sustainably. But what I would love nothing more is for you to follow our journey, join the community, and just be a part of what we're doing and embracing this evolution that we're going in, because I truly believe that we are in one of the best times to be alive, and we have more capabilities at our fingertips than we've ever had in the history of the world to run a business. So if you want strategy tailored to your business, you can book a call with us at the link in the description of this podcast, and we would love to talk strategy for the business that you have, because it's very important to remember that your opinion is not part of the recipe.